Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you greetings from His Worship the Mayor and Corporation of Walmington-on-Sea. Of course, it is a few years now since I retired, but I still keep in touch with affairs and keep a friendly eye on my successor. And of course, my colleagues working on the council and councillors and the mayor from time. And it was only a few days ago that I bumped into the mayor and told him that I was coming to Coventry. And he was most interested to hear. And he said, you know, I've been sent to Coventry 2 or 3 times. But I've never actually been there. I wonder if I come with you. I gave him the date and he said, oh dear, dear. No, he said, this clashes with a meeting of the General Purposes Committee, and it would be impossible for me to attend. He said, I can't tell you what the meeting is about, of course, but it is liable to go on into the small hours of the morning. However, he said, give them my very best wishes, so here I am to do that for you. Now, I also, just before coming up, I popped into the tourist officer's office. I'm quite interested in what is going on, you know, in Walmington. And when I told him that I was coming up to Coventry, he said, to meet you people, he said, now will you remind them that we're now taking the bookings for next summer? And in fact, he said, last year, if you remember, earlier this year, Easter fell in the month of March. Not the best time, maybe, for a weekend holiday, but this year it is much later, way back into about the 21st of April. So tell them to get their bookings in for a lovely weekend in Walmington-on-Sea. I can recommend to you those lovely walks up on the downs, which you will remember were patrolled relentlessly by those daring men, the Dad's Army, under their Captain Mannering. So, I said, of course, I will do this. So if you're sitting down this weekend and wondering what to do, just get out your diaries and look up the dates for your next summer holiday in Walmington. Now, I don't want to cast any sort of gloom on these proceedings, but I must say that I'm a little bit disappointed today. I thought, coming into this fair city of Coventry, that the ladies amongst you would be wearing flashings. So far, I haven't seen one. And alas, Mrs. Fox is not with us today. Mind you, I don't know whether she ever recovered those flashings that were stolen from her by that nasty little woman, Mrs. Mannering. I've sent her to Coventry too. But the thought has just occurred to me that after Mrs. Mannering had finished with those flashings, they wouldn't be very much use to anybody else, would they? Unless they were looking for a bell tent. However, enough of all this frivolity. I'm here today to enjoy myself amongst you all in Coventry. And I say, I'm sorry not to see you. Maybe you're covered in your fleshings with no, I can't see any long golden tresses either. When I think of that day when Mrs. Fox, oh, you've no idea what you missed on that occasion. I had a preview, you know, because of course there were all sorts of young ladies who came along applying for the job of Lady Godiva. But Lady Godiva was a woman of more mature years, not some young flibbertigibbet. And Mrs. Fox so amply filled the part to perfection. But alas, it was not to be. So Mrs. Mannering never spoke to the lady ever again. Out, I said. Get thee to Coventry. I don't know if she ever arrived here, but there we are. However, what was I going to say? Yes. I must apologise for arriving so late for this performance. I came up the A3, M25, up the M1, and heading for the M6, and on to the M6, and then, would you believe, I came off the M6 in the wrong lane, and finished up heading for the frozen north, and I've been going around Coventry City in ever decreasing circles until I eventually arrived here only 2 hours late. There we are. I'm delighted to be with you all. Bless you all. Thank you for all the things you write and say about us. And what a pleasure it is to have the vicar with me today. It's not long ago that the vicar and I and Mrs. Fox spent a weekend in Croydon at their country show, and the sun shone on us on that occasion, and we had a splendid weekend. And alas, Mrs. Fox can't be with us today. She's actually working. Lucky woman. However, here we are, and the gentleman, Ronnie, who's with us in the stage version, how many years ago? 25 years ago? Yes. Yes. I was only a boy at the time. Yeah. Yes, it's a sad thought. I just realised that I'm the oldest one left of this young gang. Yes, just 2 years older than Corporal Jones, who's still a young man, as you can see from time to time. However, lovely to be with you all, and so here's to the next time, wherever it may be.
To welcome Ronnie Grainge. Now, I don't want any booing now after his behaviour in that last episode. Come on, how did Corporal Jones describe him? Is it a bald-headed old duffer? Sorry. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Eric Longworth. And what more could be said? We've said it all before, but he is the main man. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mr. Frank Williams. Okay, what we'll do, we'll have a bit of a question and answer session in a moment, but we've got Frank and Eric here who were in that last episode. Maybe they would like to just give us a few details of the filming and how it all went and what have you. So, can you give us a bit of an outline, Frank?
Well, I don't really remember much about it. I didn't do a great deal of that, but it was really Eric's episode, and of course the lovely Pamela Candell. But may I just say that Pamela, I saw Pamela yesterday. She really was very, very sad that she isn't able to be here today. She's actually doing some filming with Mel Smith for telly, and she's even now taking off for the Isle of Man, so sadly she couldn't be here today, but she sends you all her love. Give them my love, darling, she said. So there you are. Love from Pamela Candell. Eric, what can you say about the Fleshings?
The highlight of the Fleshings to me was when Ian had to use that word. And go back a little further, when I first got into the Dad's Army way back in 1972, I'd been following the show for 4 years and thoroughly enjoying it. But the one figure who stood out to me as a marvellous character study was Ian. I'd worked with some of the cast before and I knew what they were capable of, but Ian was a new boy, practically his first job, I think, and the way he built up the character fascinated me. So when I went into the show eventually, I was very interested to see what he was like in real life. And of course he was the complete opposite of the soppy boy that you all know so well. And so the highlight of the episode, the Godiva affair, that I thought was the best bit of the whole show was when Ian had to repeat the word fleshings, and of course he gave it that extra little bit that really, I mean, I thought it was the highlight of the whole episode. Fleshings.
Can I just say also, I mean, following on what we've just been said, I mean, Ian was, as you saw in the little clip from the tour, I mean, he really was the really intelligent one of the show, and he and John Laurie and Arthur Lowe's wife Joan used to vie with each other to see which of them could complete the Times crossword first. So you can see that he was very far from being a stupid boy. He really was one of the most intelligent of the whole cast, I think.
Right, well, thanks for that. Now we've got Ronnie Grainge here, so move your chair in a bit for us, Ronnie.
I've been trying to move it out.
No, come in. Now what we need to know from Ronnie is, you were in the stage show. What are your memories and the best bits that you enjoyed from being in the stage show with the cast?
Well, I feel a bit of an imposter, you know, you don't know me, and although I must say I'm enjoying this enormously. You're marvellous people. I've met some really great people here today. And this is all wonderful, and I do hope this is the beginning of many of my visits. When I first auditioned for the stage show of Dad's Army, I'd recently, just before I'd been in Charlie Girl at the Adelphi Theatre with Anne and Eagle. And I'd been watching Dad's Army on television, and I must say, I found it enormously funny, just like everybody else. I remember falling on the ground, literally at one point, laughing at Clive Dunn. It was that episode where they were being exposed to the dangerous gases, and they had to crawl through these sort of plastic tunnels. And somebody was behind Clive and kept pushing up the backside, and Clive kept saying, "Hey, what's your game? What's your game?" And that just crazed me. I thought that was so funny, because I'd done national service and we'd done something like that, so I knew what it was like. And I auditioned for Dad's Army, and I thought, well, they won't want me, you know, I'm just a sort of young singer, come actor, dancer. But as it happened, that's what they were looking for, people, as they were putting on a musical. They wanted people who could sing and dance and do all the bits. Well, I'd been doing that. And I thought, well, if this is Dad's Army, for my audition, I always sang, "Hey, look me over," you know, "Hey, look me over, lend me any." That's what I always did. And so I thought, well, if this is an audition for Dad's Army, perhaps I should kind of, you know, do this like by way of a sergeant major, because I'd done my national service, I knew what it was like to be in the army. So when I got on, I didn't sing it, I shouted my way through it. "Hey, look me over, lend me an ear." And I did the whole thing like that, stamping and marking time and sluicing and doing all the military bit. And Roger Redfern, who directed the shows, told me a long time after that when he saw me do that, he was under the seat with laughing because he thought it was the funniest thing he'd seen for ages. And he said from that very first audition, he knew that he wanted me to understudy Bill Pritchard, you know, "Pour that line out!" And he thought, perfect. Although I did 4 auditions before I finally got the show, Roger Redfern decided that I was going to get the part because I was perfect. Well, I didn't think I would have a hope in hell. And as it turned out, I got into it, and I couldn't believe it. These were these people I'd been watching on television, all these incredible people like John Lemez, Arthur Lowe, Clive Dunn, Eric and Frank and Teddy, all the crowd. And I thought, this is magic. I'm going to be working with these people, and they're going to pay me money to be with all these amazing people. Well, I had the most marvellous year of my life. 6 months at the Shaftesbury Theatre, and then the most incredible tour, which you saw the film a little while ago, where Frank kept saying, "Oh, it's Ronnie Grainge." Well, yeah, me looking, you know, 1,000 years younger than I do now. But it was enormous fun, and I'll never forget, out of all the Marder shows I did, I think I have to say that Dad's Army was my favourite. It was a lot of fun, and Frank and I have been great friends ever since. And, you know, thank you for today. And it's absolutely marvellous meeting you. You're great people. God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Right, well, one of the things that we've all got with Dad's Army is our own personal favourite episode. Might be a little reason why keep young and beautiful when they're doing the line-up. You might be splitting your sides because Captain Manring's looking at Godfrey and saying he looks like something out of a comic opera or whatever. You've all. So what we want to know is, what is your favourite episode and why? So we'll go over to Frank and go along the line here.
I think my favourite episode we saw a bit of it in that early clip, is the Royal Train. Don't ask me why it's my favourite episode, because we remember going up and down on that, whatever you call it, pump trolley thing, and the train was actually coming after us. As you know in the episode, the train is supposed to be driven by Ian Lavender. Well, Ian, as I've just said, is one of the most intelligent people in the thing, but actually driving trains was not one of his skills. So the train had to be driven by a proper train driver, but because it was meant to be driven by Ian, the proper driver had to keep out of sight. So we realised that the driver couldn't actually see us, and the train was advancing on us. And we suddenly thought, it's getting far too close for comfort. And I remember Bill Pertwee saying, it's going to crash into us any minute, we'll all have to jump. Well, we were going at about 60 miles an hour at that point. And I said, don't be silly, Billy, we'll break our legs. He said, we'll break more than our legs if the train crashes into it. Fortunately, all was well, because they were in sort of walkie-talkie thing from behind the camera. We should have known it would all be all right. But so that was very hazardous and really hard work pumping that trolley. And then at the end of the sequence, if you remember, we all line up, and the train goes by and it soaks us all with water. So at the very end of the day's filming, we all lined up, and various members of the crew had buckets of water and on cue chucked them over us. So I should say that was my favourite episode, but it was fun. And I can remember us all getting back into the coach, dripping wet, and Arthur sort of saying, oh well, as long as there's a gin and tonic at the end of it, I suppose it's all right. But it was one. And it was also the Queen Mother's favourite episode, and they actually showed it on the day of her funeral. And I was told it was her favourite episode because, of course, Manring goes down looking for the king, and she just rather liked the fact that it mentioned her late husband. So there we are, that's my favourite episode. Here it is.
I'll give you all three guesses. Which is my favourite episode? It must be the Godiva affair. Seconded by The Love of Three Oranges, which was a Christmas special, I think 1975. And that was my second favourite, but the others, they were all, well, I enjoyed them all. But the Godiva is something quite special, introducing a word into the English language which is not on everybody's lips from day to day. And so.
It is now. Favourite episode, Ronnie?
It's just very awkward because I love them all, but I suppose Arthur doing his drunk, you know, the Cardinal Puff, that was really funny, wasn't it? But I just loved them all. They were all so funny. I mean, they were winners, everyone. That's why it's become a legend. That's why it's so famous. You can't think of anything else. Maybe Fawlty Towers, but they only did 12 episodes. But Dad's Army, that's the one, isn't it? Yeah. You can't think of anything else, can you? That's the one.
Well, Eric said about Arthur doing his drunk. I mean, that is magic. I mean, Joan was not a tearful person, but after Arthur died, the one thing that would always make her cry was when she saw Arthur doing one of his wonderful drums, because she said he did it so perfectly, and he did. What we didn't see in that clip we showed was the wonderful bit at the end where he finally gets back in the tent and does a complete twist round the pole and sit down revolving doors. Brilliant, brilliant stuff.
Okay, now, have we got any, I think we'll open it up to the floor now. Have we got any questions? Oh, a gentleman there. What? Stand up, shout it out.
If there was another role in the series which you could have taken, which one would it be?
Very good question.
Okay, the question was, if there was another role you could have taken in the series, which one would it have been? Or which one would you have liked to have taken?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't presume to have been able to play any of the others in the way they did. I do Damien pantomime every year, so I could have had to go at Mrs. Fox, I suppose. Don't tell Pamela Cundell I said that. I don't know. I wouldn't really dare to think of any of the others, because they're all so magnificent. Eric, what about you?
I think maybe Sergeant. Maybe Sergeant. Yeah. But as I was in the stage production, we just finished shooting the half a dozen plays for that season, I think 1974, and I was sitting at home quietly minding my own business one morning, and my agent rang up. He said, Eric, BBC on the phone, they want you to go into the stage version of Dad's Army and play the part of one of the platoon and understudy Arthur. The telephone fell from my nerveless fingers. And he then went on to say, I think you ought to do it. Well, I was resting very hard, so of course I said yes. And a week or so later, went to the Richmond Theatre to start rehearsing for the stage version. Private Woods was my name, and eventually, having rehearsed as a member of the platoon, the opening chorus and so on and so forth, one of the boys, who do you think you're kidding, Mr. Hitler, and so on and so forth. Eventually, the understudies got together and started rehearsing in the back room somewhere, and doing what the principals were doing. And I was thoroughly enjoying myself, being one of the chorus. The eldest chorus boy in the business that year, I think, at the tender age of 57, and singing and dancing like a good one, and trying to perform the role of one Captain Mannering. And it was only from time to time that I broke out in a cold sweat when I thought, what would happen if Arthur went sick one night and was unable to perform, and the theatre manager would go out in front of the curtain and apologise to the audience and say, but the part tonight is being played by Mr. Eric Longworth. Mr. Eric Longworth would be up in the dressing room shaking like a leaf and thinking, what on earth are the audience going to think when this other bald-headed old duffer walks on as Captain Mannering. But you will be glad to know that Arthur never went sick, although one or two of the other cast did, and their parts were played, as I recall, very happily. But yours truly lived to fight another day and enjoyed himself as Private Woods.
What was the question?
Would you like to play it? You did, didn't you?
Well, of course, yeah. As you know, I wasn't in the television, but the stage show. Well, it would have had to have been Bill Pertwee, because I understudied him, and Bill hated playing the German general. I don't know if any of you saw the stage show, but Bill also had to be a German general halfway through the show, and he hated it. he said, the audience name is Hodges. He said, I can't be a general. We did it in town at the Shaftesbury Theatre, but when we got on tour, because I was the understudy, he said, oh Ron, could you go on and do the general, because I hate doing it. I said, yes, that's fine. So I did the German general on tour. What the hell do those British things they're doing? Don't they know the war is over? So that was what I did, on tour, which was great fun, enormous fun. I have to say though, Eric said a little while ago that he was 57 during the stage show. Well, I don't know if you can work it out, but he told me just a few minutes ago that he's actually 84. Can you believe that? I mean, look, our town clerk, 84. I mean, and here he is, right, to find a picture of her. That is amazing. 84.
It was a military secret.
That was a secret. I've let the secret out. And I said your secret's safe with me. Well, it was very unsafe because here. But when you think, I mean, we had Arnold Ridley who was 80, and John Laurie who was 80, and all those other people. Well, you were young then, Eric, weren't you? Yeah, so it would have been Bill Pertwee because pour that Lord out, you hooligans! So I loved it, and that would have been mine.
Yeah, Eric was saying, I do remember Arnold Ridley was off. He arrived at the theatre one night with his wife, and she said, Arnold has got, and he was 80 by then, Arnold has got a temperature of 101, and he's insisting on playing the show. And he did actually play the show that night with a temperature of 101 at the age of 80, can you believe it? He then was off, and I can't remember who
Graham Hamilton.
Graham Hamilton had to go on, yeah, but quite a young actor.
Who was 28.
Who was 28, playing the 80-year-old, but there we are, that's understudy for you. But no, they weren't, sorry.
Another thing that amazed me when I went into the show, first of all, was Arnold Ridley playing this old man. And he actually acted the part of an old man who didn't have to play himself, no. He actually dotted about the stage. When you saw him off in the wings or out in the street, he was sprightly as anybody. Yeah.
I was going to say, particularly after the show, Arnold was always the first one into the pub. And I think on the one occasion when we had to evacuate the theatre because there was a bomb threat or something, again, of course, Pamela Cundell said to me, he was out of the stage door like a streak across to the pub where we were all meeting.
Yes, and then, having celebrated his 80th birthday, at a matinee performance where everybody, including the audience, sang happy birthdays to you, and a great enormous birthday cake wheeled on, 80, enormous, about this size, and then the curtain came down and the cast then devoured the cake and the audience went home. Shortly after, we heard that the show was coming to an end of February, and that there was possibly going to be a 6-month tour. And shortly after that, I said to Arnold one day, are you going on the tour, Arnold? He said, oh yes. If I don't, people will think that I've retired.
Of course, the cast were all old, except for Ian Lavender, who, as we saw in the episode, in the end, when he should have been called up, had such a rare blood group they couldn't transfuse him, as he said. But I think Ian Lavender was actually based on Jimmy Perry himself, who was in the Home Guard as a young boy before he was called up for the army. So, in a sense, I think he's called his autobiography Not a Stupid Boy, or something like that. And of course, it actually is. Pike is based on his own experiences as a young boy before he was called up.
Okay, next question. Can I have Keith then?
Yeah, question for Frank.
Yep.
Yeah, Frank. I first remember you, Frank, from a very successful series called The Army Game back in the 1950s and 60s. Why do you think Dad's Army has survived but the Army Game hasn't over the years?
Well, I suppose the real answer was that, believe it or not, in 59, 60, 61, television was all still live, so there were no recordings. However, Granada did in fact make a few recordings of them, unbeknown to any of us. I mean, we thought we were just doing live programmes. Once they were shown, they were gone forever, but they did record some, and they showed them on Granada Plus or something, and somebody sent me the tape. They're still quite funny, but they're very, very creaky, I have to say. I mean, the sets wobble, it's all in black and white, everybody overacts a great deal, makes a lot of faces. It really is very unsophisticated television. And I think the reason why Dad's Army has survived is because it's all based on the characters, and the characters all became well-loved people. And you watch those clips, and you just absolutely wait, and you wait, and you wait for Maverick to say what you know he's going to say, stupid boy. And you know, and you wait, and this is marvellous. I mean, that's how it works, I think.
Right, next question, gentleman again.
Yeah, I've read somewhere that the location, or maybe even the stage, there was some hilarious moments in that on location. Can you remember particularly one time that you can remember that sticks out in your mind from the location shoot?
Well, I've already mentioned the Royal Train, which was a hazard. I can remember in the one where the barrage balloon took off with Maverick on the end of it. That was quite fun, because we were all told to be very careful the way you held the barrage balloon. Don't wrap the rope round your fingers, around your hand, because if in fact it did take off, it could take off with you dangling on the end of it. You needed to be able to let go of it. So somebody had the bright idea that I was the clergyman and hold it like that, as though I was in prayer, which was quite a nice idea. I can't remember, I mean, I do remember the location filming as being wonderfully idyllic time. I mean, Croft always had the most marvellous weather, and you know, it was just a wonderful time, and we would all go out and do this location filming. We worked quite hard, but then in the evening we would go back to the hotel, and we'd relax, and we'd have a drink, and we'd have a meal together, and it was just wonderful. And I think it was Ian Lavender who said at the end of it all, well, what are we going to do for our summer holidays now when it was all over? And I mean, it wasn't a holiday, but it was a wonderful time of that location filming, I must say. No.
Right, have you got any more?
The location filming, oh, wait a minute, sorry, Eric did do some location filming.
I did, yes, 2 or 3. The Nights of Madness.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, a great fun. And the Captain's Car, The Honourable Man.
Yes.
What else? 3 or 4 at the time.
I always think of you as being in the studio,
Yeah.
but of course you were, yes, of course. There were those, but they were fun, weren't they, that location?
Oh,
A wonderful time, yeah.
Yes, the French General and the
French General,
the
yeah.
Captain's Car and,
Yeah.
and Bill getting himself covered in paint.
Bill got himself covered in things in every episode.
Yeah. Well, this was where they'd painted the lady thing of his car into
That's right.
army colours,
Yeah,
and also the mayor's car
yeah,
got involved.
yeah, yeah.
And the French general was greeted and said a few words, and then Bill got involved and got himself all covered in paint, was he?
Yeah. I think the great thing about Bill was, if there were any doubt about how to get a laugh, they'd say, let Bill fall in the water, because Bill fell in the water in almost every episode. And poor man, I mean, they did have quite a time, yeah.
Okay, any more questions? No. Right, well, there is one, okay, well, maybe we'll wrap it up with this thought question. At the end of the series, when you decided that it was going to be the last one, do you feel that they could have made more, and were you happy with the decision that they decided to end the Dad's Army series, or did you think, oh no, we could have had another couple of episodes? And how did you feel about it?
Yes, up to the 1972 series, which I was in the 13th of 13 episodes, And after that, they never did more than 6 or 7 episodes in any one year. But the beauty of it was they always repeated the previous 6 or 7 years. So you saw another 13, sometimes 14 episodes going right through to the end of the show. I'm not sure which year it was, but I know Jim has said once they were getting a bit short on ideas. And then there was the occasion in 1974 when only 6 episodes were done. And I was in 3 out of the 6. And I thought, great, great. Then next year, it was down to 1 episode out of 7. And the word went round, in fact it was Mrs. Pike who told me that Bill had been told to cut down on the castings just to economise slightly. And so poor Mrs. Pike was down to, I think, like I was, down to 1 episode out of 7. But that's life in the army.
I do think, a lot of us were obviously very, very sad when the series came to an end. But I think it was right to go out when we were still on a high, because when we actually finished, we were still, pulling in the ratings, the audience was still loving it, and it would have been very sad to go on and sort of fizzle out. But they did quite deliberately not end the stage show. I think I remember rightly, ended with the disbanding of the Home Guard. Have I got that right, Ronnie? Yes, it did. But the television series didn't. And it was that wonderfully moving moment when, after the wedding of Corporal Jones to Mrs. Fox, so she's really Mrs. Jones now, but she never remembers that. There was a wonderful moment where they grouped on the cliff and they drank a toast to the men of the Home Guard, and it was a wonderful ending, and it was a real ending. But it did just leave the vague possibility that, had they wanted to do so, they could have gone on and done another series. But very sadly, just after the end of that series, Teddy Sinclair, who played the Verger, died, and it was actually at Teddy's funeral that Arthur, paying tribute, said, and that makes it clear that there can be no more DAAS Army. And yes, it was sad, but we did go out on a high, and it was great. And one of the things I feel sad about in a way, but let's face it, they were in their 80s 30 years ago, so it's not that, but that some of those people are not still around to see the wonderful success it has had over the years, long after it was recorded. None of us dreamt it would be still enjoyed by so many people right across the age range, 30 years on. So it was a wonderful thing to have done, and I'm very grateful, as I think anybody else who's in it should be.
Okay.
Frank, who did write that rude word?
Sorry?
Who did write that rude word on the harmonium?
Rude word.
We never found out, and I'm certainly not going to tell you what the rude word was. In fact, I don't think I even know. I covered my eyes. I didn't even look.
Okay. Now, there's one final question. Is there any more questions from the floor? Right. The final question, which I feel is very pertinent today, is what's going wrong with British comedy? Where are they getting it right, and where are they getting it wrong today in what you see on the television?
Do you want to go on that, Ronnie?
Nothing stays the same. Everything changes. Young people are completely different. Those of us who are elderly here will know that today's youngsters are very different from the way we were. They laugh at different things to what we laughed at. Nothing stays the same. Everything changes. That's progress. There's nothing we can do about that. So we might think that today's comedy is lewd and rude, a lot of swearing and everything, but that's what the young people want. When they're old like us, those of us who are old will feel the same way. Everything changes.
the one great thing about Dad's Army is that it appeals to all ages. And when you look at some of the things that are put on the screen these days, and you wonder who on earth concocted this little lot of nonsense, and get the children out of the room quick. If you've got children around, which I haven't at this point in time. My 4 sons are well and truly grown up, and 5 grandchildren, and now 2 and a little bit. I went to one of my son's silver weddings last month, and this was number 2 son who was catching up. His eldest son, my eldest son and the 3rd son had already celebrated there, so he was catching up at last. And my eldest granddaughter, who got married for the 2nd time last October, having married at the age of 20 and divorced at the age of 22, and was childless. And I've been waiting for some good news from that part of the world ever since, well, not immediately after last October, but into this year. And during the course of the party up in Highbury, she handed me a card which I opened up, and it was a photo of a scan of an 11-week-old baby-to-be, my 3rd great-grandchild-to-be, which really put the icing on top of the cake for that silver wedding, and for my eldest granddaughter and husband, he being a sprightly 41-year-old, and also on his 2nd marriage, and both looking desperately forward to enjoying the joys of parentage. But am I digressing from the question? That is, as one does when one reaches old age.
Well, I've never married, so I can't talk about grandchildren or great-grandchildren that I know of anyway. And but I would like to say one thing about modern comedy. Pamela Cundell once asked a 12-year-old fan, "Why do you like Dad's Army?" And he thought, and he said, "Because it's funny and not rude." And I mean, I do think that actually sums it up in a way. Eric touched on that. It's wonderful family viewing. It goes right across the age range, and that's what I sort of take the point Ronnie's making that people change. But I sort of grew out of the kind of joke where you just said a 4-letter word and fell about when I was about 14. I mean, I got over it then, but nowadays, it seems to me you could stand up in front of an audience and say a 4-letter word and everybody falls around and say you made the most witty remark ever. And I just don't think that really is humour, but there we are. At least the Perry and Croft stuff, most all of it, not just Dad's Army, is timeless, and that was great.
Okay, well, I think we'll wrap it up there on those excellent words. And I'd like to thank our guests today. Sorry, was there a quick question?
Yeah. I was just wondering, obviously as you worked all together you got very close, but was there one member of the cast that you were especially friends with?
Okay, the question is, when you worked together, obviously the cast got very close, but was there any particular one person that you became particularly close to?
Not one, but I do, in a sort of extraordinary way, particularly, I suppose, with the stage show, which I think you can see on that tour. Teddy Sinclair, Bill Pertwee, Ronnie and myself became a sort of foursome that did a great deal together. And Teddy remained a very close friend until he died. Bill and Ronnie are still very close friends. We see the others from time to time, but I have to say, I suppose, Billy and Teddy, and then when we did the stage show, Ronnie, we became really very close friends and felt really very close to each other. Eric?
I can't really say I had any special close friends because I mean, it was just a joy to be in the show, and they were also welcoming, and it was nice to pick out their idiosyncrasies and so on and so forth, and have a quiet smile from time to time about various things that actors do when they're performing. No special close friends, I must say, no.
Well, Eric and I were in the same dressing room at the Shaftesbury Theatre, and that was fun, and Eric was always very special to me. I had a lot of respect for Eric, because, well, as you see, I mean, he's so amusing and witty and such great company. And, well, obviously it was Frank. Frank and I go to church on Sunday. We're both, you know, well, Frank especially is very much into religion, you know, and I just sort of walk in his shadow, but we do go to church every Sunday and we enjoy that very much. And I suppose that's how we first came together, because I was a very devout Christian in '75 when we first met, and he was also a very devout Christian, and I suppose that's what first attracted us to each other, that we were both very religious then. And as I said, we even today still go to church together, which is nice, apart from the theatre, you know, it's something else, another sort of perk. But they're also marvellous. Somebody asked a question earlier about would you have liked it to have gone on. Of course, everyone wanted it to go on, but people were getting really, really old, and people were dying, you know, all the great stars, John the Measurer, they were dying. And so at the last episode, people were really beginning to look ill, especially John the Measurer. And so there's a great saying in show business, always leave them wanting more. And I think Dad's Army left everybody wanting more. But the blessing is we can still see them, all these marvellous people. We can still watch them on the television and love it all. People who weren't even alive when they were performing can see them all now and love them. We knew them and loved them. Well, you know, the younger people can love them, although they didn't know them. But they certainly left them wanting more. Thank you.
Before we finish, can I just say one thing? I do want to say thank you very much indeed to Tony and Paul and Jack for all they do for the Dad's Army Appreciation Society, and to Eddie for organising this wonderful event today, and really all you wonderful people who make up the DAAS, because it is, you know, you really are very important to us, and thank you for your loyalty and your kindness and your love over the years. Thank you.